This One's Wife. With love, Meghan. Season 1, Part 2. Boring, banal, and bumlicking. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. If you can detect an air of resignation about my voice, it's because I've just endured one episode of Part 2 of Season 1. It's not Season 2, we all know that. Of This One's Wife's lifestyle show. I had to put it on 1.5 speed to get through it. What do we know? Well, unsurprising, it's another exercise in her narcissism, and the amazing guest that we start off with in episode 1, A Sweet and Savoury Adventure, is none other than Crying Makeup Man. Yes. It appears that this was naturally from the first recording and that they didn't come back and do some additional recording. So it's not season 2 at all. It's part 2 of season 1. Unless, of course, he has been trapped in the Monty Shit Show mansion all this time with only bath salts and pretzels for company. This One's Wife tells him that they've got friends visiting. How exciting. This One's Wife is wearing an ill-fitted striped dress, which again doesn't seem entirely appropriate for the kitchen. Her hair is down and straggly all over the place, and she's wearing all of the jewellery, as ever. She's attempting to show off her non-existent cleavage. This One's Wife suggests that it should be appropriate to make an easy caramelised tart. So my immediate assumption was she was just going to throw sugar over herself, but I got that wrong. Apparently, it's even easier, especially if you've got puff pastry, which you should always have. As she says this, she points directly at Daniel Martin, who seems to miss the clear implication of This One's Wife's observation about puff pastry. Once again, Daniel Martin's role is to stand around and ooh and ah at This One's Wife's brilliance and be generally enthusiastic arse-licker extraordinaire. He tells us, and this is a fantastic revelation, that he's more comfortable cutting onions than last time. Well, that's good to know. I'll certainly sleep easier tonight as a consequence of that knowledge. And apparently, he realised that he needed a bigger knife. Apparently, the knife was too small for his big, manly hand. And this was all said without a hint of irony. So Daniel Martin is the first who rocks up with his forced enthusiasm and hanger-on extraordinaire, as he is there purely for bum-licking duties. But who are the actual guests? Well, they're Dave Chang and Christina Tosi. Daniel Martin very helpfully explains to us that he's got Dave Chang's ramen noodles in his cupboard, and that Tosi's outlet is just 2 blocks from his apartment on the Upper West Side in New York. Great. He's already established a connection, because we know that This One's Wife is all about connections. Indeed, at this juncture, I was steeling myself for the first infusion of joy, wondering when a tsunami of joy was going to wash over me in this episode, along with, of course, those ubiquitous bastard flour sprinkles. Well, This One's Wife then informs David and Christina are great friends, like us. And yes, she delivers like us in a strange voice. Don't ask me why, she's just a weirdo. This One's Wife then excels at putting some butter and oil and some onions in a pan. There are lashings of vocal fry already. The result of this is vocal fry with a brown mass. It could be a tumour, I'm not sure, but either way, she then throws some cheese over it. Guy the Beagle wanders in and has a drink. The puff pastry appears. No, not Daniel, and this is glazed with egg. The brown mass is spooned out. This One's Wife then makes them into blossoms. Daniel tells us this is fun. The items then go into the oven, which is apparently heated to 400 degrees, yet you can see no heat shimmer, no steam, nothing. And then it cuts to the finished item. Who the dickens actually cooked them? Archie? Harry, the cooking fairies? Nope. We then have the film or the programme cut to this one's wife laughing to herself, no doubt so delighted at how wonderful she is. We then cut to this one's wife asking off camera if Daniel Martin wants her to powder him. Aha! The old Colombian has come out early doors, caught them. This is going to be sensational. Oh, no. Actually, it's a completely meaningless and pointless instance of Daniel Martin adding some makeup to this one's wife's face, and then she dabs some on him. Fucking fascinating. But lo, Chang and Tosi arrive, and it's time for drinks, but no day drinking just yet. It's coffee. This one's wife then demonstrates her culinary skill in pouring coffee, as it's time to talk about it's time for the guests to talk about themselves, meaning this one's wife has to put on her best fake, this is really interesting face, as the facade grapples with the spotlight shifting onto somebody other than her. Tosi then, in an obligatory planted question, asks how did this one's wife and Daniel Martin meet? Naturally, Daniel isn't allowed to speak, as this one wife jumps in and tells her that, unlike Chang and Tosi's genuine recollection, this one's wife delivers a breathless tale of how they met, as if it was the most momentous event in history. It's overbaked, unlike the caramelised tart, and it's demonstrative, yet again, of how she injects this breathless urgency into something which is entirely mundane. Apparently, they've been involved through lots of chapters. Yes, once again, the main character syndrome of this one's wife is strong. This one's wife announces the onion tarts, and apparently that the Silkies have laid, but nobody knows what she's talking about, so we get a picture of one which looks like a rather fluffy chick, and it's called Phil, or possibly Jill. This one's wife then fries some eggs, because nobody's ever done that before. Daniel inspires us by explaining that egg and tart is a very New York thing. This one's wife explains that she's going to be putting everyone in and out of their comfort zone. Wow. It's flower arranging, and then they'll be going back to the kitchen. Chang queries, I don't know if you two are competitive. This one's wife immediately jumps in by saying, I'm not, he is. Which, of course, her nose then grows at this point. This one's wife produces some gifts, and she tells Tosi, I love your love of scarves, so I decided to make some. And then it cuts to my guide to water marbling. This one's wife has changed outfit, and she looks like she stood in a Chinese laundry. There are various things hanging behind her as she chatters away to herself. She adds some dye to some water which has been thickened with something called carrigan, and then she puts a cloth in, and she pulls out a small sheet which just looks like it's light blue. She then does better with the second attempt, which is a Californian sunset, while marvelling at her own brilliance. How have I never done this before? She explains to nobody in particular. We then return to the guests unwrapping their gifts, and this one's wife tells us today is about finding new things we may or may not be good at. That she never stops with the insightfulness. Then we're on to the flower arranging. There's a lot of find what speaks to you. I was completely unaware until this point that vases and flowers had voices, so I've clearly been missing out. One of the vases has a crack in it, and there follows much hilarity as it spills liquid all over the countertop. This one's wife tells us she likes things not perfectly symmetrical. Presumably, she's talking all about her relationships, which always have to be in her favour. Tosi explains, I'm a plant lady, not a flower person. This one's wife issues a forced, oh my God, how interesting. I sit there thinking, no, it's not. My will to live left me probably about 30 seconds into the show, but showing considerable intestinal fortitude, I have persevered. This one's wife tells us about childlike wonder and how great it is to be curious. So far, we've avoided any infusions of joy, however. David Chang next attempts to tell us an anecdote about samurai doing flower arranging and calligraphy to hone their dexterity before battle. This one's wife immediately interrupts him, but she puts her hands to her head. Isn't it so wild? I do calligraphy and flower arranging, she announces. Wow, what a massive fucking coincidence. Who'd have thought it? No, says Chang dutifully, following this planted observation. you'd be a hell of a samurai. Once again, we see that this is simply a vehicle to herald what a wonderful and amazing human being this one's wife is. After all, she is a narcissist, and it needs to be all about her. The result of the flower arranging is quite simply some very small pathetic effort from Daniel Martin, and the other three have created hedges. Nevertheless, the hedges are something that a self-respecting pervert wouldn't even want to jump out of naked. But this one's wife tells us they're so good with her faux enthusiasm. They all came out so beautiful. Chang, once again demonstrating that he's been given his cue cards of bumlickery alongside Martin, states it's clear that this one's wife has won. Yes, once again, it's her programme and she's got guests, but the guests aren't allowed to shine, she has to. Well, after that completely boring episode of flower arranging, which just consisted of lots of foliage being passed around whilst people shared banal observations, it's back to the kitchen. And now we're going to learn about s'mores and graham crackers. Daniel Martin announces, "I can't believe we're making these from scratch," as if they're going to be formulating the cure for cancer. Daniel Martin then goes on to tell us that he's got goosebumps at the mention of peanut butter graham crackers. All we need is for Jamie Three Names to pop her head around the door and announce that she's got full body chills. This one's wife tells us that there should be lavender honey crackers, and then she attempts to do a dance whilst grinding the lavender. We see her wielding a knife, and she still can't hold it properly, placing her finger along the top of the blade. The Grahamies gets shoved into the oven, which again demonstrates it's not actually being heated. Daniel is then forced out of his comfort zone as he has to melt some items on the stove to make brown butter. This one's wife announces that we're water marbling with marshmallows. And she then disappears into the garden with Dave Chang. No, not to perform something that you'd ordinarily think that she does in the garden, or to pop down and have a wee and announce the latest as ever drop, but they're out there going into a garden that's not hers, with a basket that's not hers, to collect some sugar snap peas, choy and basil, as she would say, that also isn't hers. Back in the kitchen, Chang announces teamwork's not the easiest for him. Daniel Martin announces, "I'm a great assistant." I think he was meant to say, "I'm a great arse licker." Chang asks for some help mincing some garlic. Daniel misses his cue and instead peels the sugar snap peas instead. He announces, "That smells amazing already." This one's wife flutters her eyelashes, but he wasn't talking about the musk that's rising from the cavern between her legs. This one's wife announces that with cooking, you choose your own adventure. Well, I must be mistaken again. I thought that was a children's book. For once, this one's wife's hair isn't in the food actually ends up in her hair, as Tosi is picking cabbage out of it. Why we needed to see that? Presumably because they ran out of material and had to fill it with something. This one's wife points out that at the vegetable-strewn countertop, this is the opposite of my clean as you go, issuing a barb put down towards Chang and his method of working. Throughout, there's plenty of this one's wife's fake laugh grimace, where she attempts to think that she's laughing and then does that weird leaning forward action as well. You know what I mean, you've seen it many occasions. Next, we see this one's wife mashing the ginger furiously, pummeling away with pestle and mortar. No, the Prince of Pink Pancakes hasn't made an entrance. It quite simply is ginger to be used in the food. She enjoys a high five with Chang, and then Tosi's turn to come out with a planted question. Where did you learn to cook, this one's wife? The bullshitometer comes in. This one's wife announces, watching cooking shows growing up. That's what I enjoyed watching. And then in college, the first thing you live alone, I was into Rachel Ray's 30-minute meals. Really? The flatbread's completed, the vegetables are done, so Chang and Daniel Martin go outside to cook the steak on the grill. Martin looks somewhat intimidated by the much larger Chang, but he manages to cook the steak in 2.5 minutes, and then Tao brings out some beverages. This might be where some day drinking comes into the scene. All of this time, one's been wondering where the bastard ubiquitous flour sprinkles are. They eventually turn up on some of the vegetables, but we don't see them being sprinkled, and this one's wife doesn't even make mention of them, which of course somewhat defeats the purpose of this whole programme of itself. This one's wife then invites everybody to consider how collaborative it all's been, and we engage in some mutual backslapping. This one's wife listens as Daniel Martin offers his thanks, and Daniel is praised for his enthusiasm. The next moment, it's nightfall, and they're all sat outside, toasting marshmallows and having the s'mores. Daniel Martin announces, "I've never had peanut butter in a s'more before. I can never go back." This man just lets us into his life so much, doesn't he? I've been wondering where all the joy is, and right at the end, this one's wife delivers. "It brings me so much joy," she announces. "Everyone's having such fun." She then recaps what has gone on during the course of the day, as if everybody has the inability to remember either that they've turned into goldfish or Will Smith has turned up with his device from Men in Black to wipe their memories, necessitating her giving a run-through of everything that they have done. The end credits tell us it's produced by Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. Yes, clinging onto that title as ever. Overall, what do you get? It's pretty much like it was the first time around. Banal, boring, and with plenty of bum licking. This one's wife doesn't actually do that much. We don't really see her cooking anything. She chucks some stuff in a pan, she puts something in the oven, doesn't seem to keep an eye on it. She does some water marbling, which doesn't look that good, it isn't particularly complex. The flour arranging is shambolic, and the chefs take over naturally when it comes to doing the proper stuff, such as the creation of the vegetables and cooking the steak and the creation of the s'mores and the relevant mix that's utilised with it also, as she stands around opining and occasionally seeking to chip in with her supposed knowledge about cookery, which we all know is limited indeed. There's not so much of the day drinking here. It might turn up in later episodes. Who gives a rat's ass? Because I can tell you something, having watched one episode, that's one episode too many. I think I'll probably rely upon other reviews in the mainstream media and pick out the juicy morsels which exhibit her narcissism. There is absolutely no way on this bastard planet that I'm going to sit through more episodes of this nonsense. Doubtless there'll be those that will have enjoyed it because it's light and fluffy. For everybody else, it's more of the same. This one's wife not really doing any cooking or baking. This time we don't see her really moving things around on a charcuterie board or fruit platter. I'm sure that'll come along in a future episode. She's a charisma-free host. There's no warmth about her. There's no personality. She attempts to make it look like she always knows what she's doing, and it seems forced and false, which of course is entirely accurate. There's the chefs aside, who obviously are experts in their field. There's nobody of note as a consequence of Daniel Martin being rolled out again, but at least he doesn't cry. And he's there just as cheerleader number one, licking the bottom of this one's wife and enthusing about everything that comes his way. There'll be those that think that it's harmless, and in a way it is. But if you think that you're going to actually learn anything particularly inspiring, think again. It's once again a vehicle for the narcissism of this one's wife, as she is portrayed as being wonderful and competent in the kitchen, even though it's not hers. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.